everyone. This is Randa Sawi. I'm the head of external communications and brand for Ericsson Middle East and Africa. I will be hosting today with me in this podcast Mashhoor El Sudairi, head of local content for Ericsson Saudi Arabia, and Ali Shima, the head of government and industry relations for Ericsson Middle East and Africa. So, if I start with Ali, can you please tell us, Ali, regarding this new spectrum release that we have heard about in Saudi Arabia? We need to understand from you what is the use of different radio spectrum and how is it relevant to government and people?
First off, thank you very much, Randa. This is very exciting times for us with a lot of interesting decisions being taken by markets like Saudi Arabia, which are fantastic. And before I go deeper into this really exciting decision and this really groundbreaking work that Saudi and the CITC, which is the regulator within Saudi, have done with regards to spectrum, I think I would like to just give you a very quick brief of what does it mean and why is what different types of radio spectrum um, are there and why is this relevant to a country, to a government, to the people of the country. I think we've all heard the statement saying spectrum is the lifeblood of mobile industry. We like mobility, we thrive on mobility, and network spectrum is radio wave spectrum is what allows us to be mobile, to communicate through the radio waves that are going around. But if we look at it in real sense of the words, and take an example of communication in other ways. Let's look at transportation. I mean, there are different types of cars that have different characteristics. Some sports cars can move really fast, but they can carry only maybe two people at a time. There are cars which have the capability of going everywhere or off-roading, but they cannot really go with high speeds. But then if you go off the road, there are trains which can carry a lot of traffic, a lot of freight and load at the same time. Uh, but then again, they are limited in terms of they can only go on the track. When it comes to radio spectrum, it's kind of like the same. Depending on what you're looking to do, you need a different type of radio spectrum. The lower bands are excellent at reaching people in far places, but then they're not too much of them. So we cannot carry, they cannot sustain the extreme high throughputs that are there. So for those higher throughput carriers, we need the very high bands like the millimeter wave band that is there. But that band can give you gigabits of throughputs, but they are not able to go very far. So, and then there comes the middle band. They offer you decent amount of coverage, they offer you decent amount of capacity, and they're ideal for citywide coverage. And just by giving you these three examples, you can see to have a thriving ecosystem, whether it's on the transport end or it's on the mobile communications end, you need to have the mix of all three different types of bands, all different types of cars to sustain the high freight loads, to have the high speed cars that we all like, of course, in this part of the world. And of course, we like to go off road as well with our off roading in the desert safaris. So that is essentially what we are doing. It is, if you want to have services to all the stakeholders, to all people, if you want to give them digitalized services across the whole country, and Saudi is a very big country, so you need to be able to reach them at far distance with the low bands. Then you want to have a thriving ecosystem where you really want to touch up those extreme high capacity use cases. That's where you need the millimeter wave. And then you need the mid bands to make sure those use cases are traversed throughout all the major cities. So that's just to give you a background of what it really means.
Yeah. So thank you, Ali. I think this was a very good way to describe what this means. But can you explain more what actually happened in Saudi Arabia? What is this new spectrum release?
Oh yes. So let's talk tangible stuff. Absolutely. So in times of, I mean, in recent times, Saudi Arabia and the government overall has given a very clear strategy of prioritizing communication, making sure digitalization is something they want to anchor the vision, the Saudi Vision 2030 on. And CITC with this is sort of driving that vision in the same fervor, with the same exuberant, and making spectrum available. And that and I know the question is more what they did now, but we have to acknowledge what they did in the recent past, which from 20, I wish I should say mid from 2018 onwards, things started to change in such a positive manner that now Saudi is among the top 5 countries in terms of the global speed test index. So they've been releasing spectrum quite efficiently. So now what they did was they really took it to the next level. Till now, Saudi regulator has been making existing spectrum available, all the main pieces of spectrum in the mid band, 2.6, 2.3 that were made available. Then 3.5 was made available. That enabled the launch of 5G in the kingdom. But what now they're doing is they're actually taking it to the next level. They have recently published a new outlook for spectrum, which focuses from now till 23 to 2025 timeframe, in which they are going to release pieces of spectrum in licensed, unlicensed, as well as license exempt, as well as lightly licensed regimes. The key for us in this case is the one that they're releasing in the IMT band, focusing around the release of somewhere around an additional 116 megahertz in the low band, additional spectrum in about 350 megahertz in the mid, and about 3.25 gigahertz of spectrum in the upper band that have been sort of earmarked to be used for mobile. To be specific, the two key bands here that have played a very big role is making available the 600 megahertz for IMT use, and this is a band which was not previously being used for IMT, and traditionally there's a lot of broadcast use, but broadcast being moved into the digital forum now, there's space available, and Saudi has moved forward in allocating that part towards mobile use in the kingdom. And this, because there is already an existing ecosystem coming in from the US, this would mean that this will really spur the market and allow to reach the far to reach areas, the new cities that are coming up in Saudi, and also provide coverage on the vast transport networks and the vast highways that are ranging all across the kingdom. They will be covered using this band. In addition to that, they've also made available additional spectrum in the C band, which is the mid band 3.5 gigahertz of between 3.8 to 4 gigahertz a band, which will allow each of the operators now to have 200 megahertz of contiguous spectrum per operator. And I'm going to quote one of our dear friend and one of the guys I think who we respect quite a lot, Dr. Saheli of the CITC, and he said that 200 megahertz is the new 20 megahertz of the mobile broadband world. And I fully agree with him, because this is going to drive a new wave of how spectrum will be utilized by operators. So once again, fantastic work done, and very, very exciting times ahead of us in the kingdom.
Thank you, Ali. Really impressive. So you got me excited to actually move to Mashhur and ask you, maybe Mashhur, you can explain to us how all this will benefit the society in KSA.
Yes, thank you, Randa, for this opportunity to talk about this great and historical decision by the Saudi government through the CITC. There is, of course, a lot of benefits to society in that regard. So this basically will benefit the society through offering all users the access to spectrum they need to innovate and to grow by managing the spectrum effectively and efficiently in close collaboration with all stakeholders. Also, this spectrum release will strengthen the 5G infrastructure in Saudi and will enable the 5G experience to the maximum levels possible. We've all, of course, lived through the COVID-19 pandemic last year. We all saw that how the solid telecom infrastructure in Saudi Arabia enabled different industry, education, healthcare, banking, retail, security, and it enabled us in Ericsson and all other companies to work remotely. So it was and evident that this is how important the infrastructure is when you have a strong and solid telecom infrastructure in place. And this new release will even make this infrastructure even much more stronger than it already is.
Thank you, Mashhoor. Maybe if you can tell us more, how is this new spectrum release aligned with the KSA 2030 vision?
Yeah. So this new spectrum release is critical for at least 5 Vision 2030 programs, such as the National Industrial Development and Logistic Program, the NEDLib, it's called NEDLib, Human Capital Development Program, Hajj and Umrah Program, Financial Sector Development Program, Quality of Life Program. Further, the spectrum release will also have substantial economical impact for KSA, such as non-oil revenues through spectrum auctions that will happen for those released spectrums. GDP contribution expected to reach around 20% in 2025. And also a lot of network-related investments to enable the use of this spectrum.
Thank you so much, Mashhoor. This sounds really exciting. So, if I move back to Ali, maybe Ali, you can tell us more about Ericsson's position and what advice would Ericsson give to local operators to benefit the end users or the enterprise from this new release?
Thank you, Randa. It's a very interesting time for us when it comes to Ericsson's position in general. I should say Ericsson's position in specific and the mobile industry in general. What the decision from CITC does is, we are in the process of considering, we see 5G rolling out quite aggressively all across the globe. We see, of course, Middle East, particularly Saudi and other markets around it, are leading the way in terms of initial deployments of 5G. But what's also interesting is as markets are picking up this 5G deployment, they're also trying to figure out how this is going to change our world. And as Mashhoor was mentioning, there are initiatives that need to be driven to make use of this communication revolution that is 5G. By making this spectrum available, the CITC, Ericsson believes the CITC has opened the possibility for our partners, of course, MNOs, as well as our ecosystem developers like ourselves, infrastructure developers ourselves, to really push the envelope in markets like Saudi. The potential right now is with spectrum such as 600 megahertz, which is now offering additional spectrum in the low band and using the ecosystem, which is now already very, very much, it's a decently mature ecosystem coming in from the US and region 2. We should be able to support our partners in really building out the ecosystem, which is for the first time not just focused around a few hotspots as the initial deployments of 5G is, but rather looking to reach the whole of the nation, rather looking to reach all the population centers which have any amount of decent amount of population. And also what it does, it allows for the operators, which are our partners in delivering this communication revolution, to make sure that they can give cost-effective coverage while at the same time providing high-quality services with the mobile broadband services that will enable those digital initiatives, taking Saudi and its people into the next generation, really picking up and achieving the Vision 2030. In addition to this, so low band, of course, is very, very important. And what is further more important is, for all practical purposes, radio spectrum is something, it's a shared resource. It's a national resource which is shared between different services. So for all practical purposes, this is the last bit of spectrum in the low band that will be available for any foreseeable future, because other services are using spectrum in bands adjacent to it. So now this is a big opportunity for us to really bring in the momentum shift and bringing the change that to achieve the Vision 2030. In addition to this, what we talked about the mid band and the additional 200 megahertz spectrum, what is critical there is yes, initial deployments of 5G were happening in 3.5 with 100 megahertz, as have been done with all of our operators in the Saudi. But what's interesting is with this additional 100 megahertz, they can really push the envelope and attain use cases which previously were not thought possible. And that is the whole message. That is the whole key of 5G. 5G is not just about doing mobile broadband and doing something that we've been doing in the past a little bit better. It is about enabling a completely new way of doing things. It's about a paradigm shift of developing use cases which we haven't really thought of, and possibly the youth which will it'll be the youth which will come up with these use cases, and that's another thing that we are trying to do through that we'd love to do through this the enablement of these use cases that are yet to be thought of by the youth of Saudi. So in all, what I would like to say is through this new spectrum release, Ericsson can bring in world leading solutions to provide coverage, to provide capacity, and to make sure that um, there's enough new innovative use cases available that can be driven by our operators. And now, to be frank, the sky is the limit of what we can achieve in terms of the next couple of years of targets. And we are very excited to work with our partners inside Saudi, the mobile operators, so that we can deliver all these exciting new use cases that are coming our way.
Thank you, Ali, very much. This brings us to our last question. So I move to Mashhoor. Mashhoor, we would like to hear from you to summarize all this interesting discussion and tell us briefly how can 5G benefit KSA?
So I guess I can echo what Ali was saying about the importance of 5G use cases to enable a lot of industries in Saudi Arabia. And but here, let me focus on the impact that the economical impact that this will have and the direct contribution to the Saudi GDP. So 5G will support increasing GDP in different sectors. And those numbers are based on a study done by CITC, the Communication and IT Commission, which is the regulator in Saudi Arabia. So it will have an impact on energy sector by increasing GDP contribution 4.1%, services 4.5%, healthcare 2.3%, retail 3.4%, education and culture by 3.5%. So the benefits that 5G will provide for KSA and other nations in the world will be unthought of in the past. And again, as Ali mentioned, the use cases that we can start developing around 5G is endless, and the possibility that it provides in energy, healthcare, education is also endless. So I think Saudi government made a very strategic decision to embrace 5G technology and to make sure that the government, all government agencies are aligned with the 5G strategy of Saudi Arabia.
Thank you very much, Mashhoor and Ali. It was really an honor and a pleasure having you in today's podcast. And we look forward to talking to you again in another podcast, perhaps in the future. And I would like to thank all the listeners who listened to this podcast today. And with this, we reach the end of the podcast. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely rest of the day. Bye bye.